Welcome back to Align Yourself podcast. I'm the host, Ebony Rose, and today's conversation is one that will really make you stop and think about the systems we live in and what it truly means to be free. I'm joined by Mike, founder of Common Law, who's here to help us understand what's really happening behind the scenes of digital ID. In this episode, we unpack what digital ID actually is and why so many people are concerned about it, and how we can begin to take back more control over our own lives. Mike also shares how we can start making small, practical changes to live more independently and how to have open and empowering conversations about these topics. This episode is an eye-opening, empowering, and a reminder that awareness is the first step towards freedom. Let's get into it. Mike, hello, and welcome to Align Yourself podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure.
Mike, if there's one thing the person listening with us today takes from today's episode, what would it be?
That's a good question. Believe in yourself, I think, is probably the first and most important thing. You've got to know yourself before you can do anything else. And then knowledge is power, which is our slogan on the Common Law website. And in fact, on just about everything I do, knowledge is power. And that's what I do. I try and educate as many people as possible through my work and help them to understand their position in the world, their rights. And once they know what their rights are and how they're protected in law, then they can stand up against the bullies and the cowards and the traitors who are trying to destroy our country.
So let's go back in time. I would love to learn more about who you are and what led you to becoming who you are today.
I joined the Air Force in 1965, and I swore an oath to the Crown that I would protect the country and our laws. And that oath still stands today. They sent me over to the Vietnam War, and when I came back, I realized that the whole thing was a sham, and that's when my doubts really started. A couple of years after I got out of the Air Force, Gough Whitlam was elected, and we all know now that he threw the Queen out of our Constitution, registered the Constitution to a private company, and set up his own parliament, which is why they moved out of the old Parliament House into the new one, because that's not a genuine Parliament House as approved by we the people. So basically that's their corporate headquarters. Our public headquarters is in the old Parliament building, and they turned that into a museum. Well, they're wrong. It's not going to be a museum for much longer. We're working on that.
So, Mike, what led you to creating and founding Common Law?
Well, I'd always been interested in my rights and the law, but when COVID started, actually long before COVID, I actually met Dick Yardley pretty early on in my search, because I returned home from Thailand in 2009, and in 2012, Gillard stabbed Rudd in the back, and I thought, hang on a minute, we don't do coups in Australia. So that's when I really started looking into things, and I ended up having a lot of doubts, but not very many answers. So when Dick Yardley started telling me that the government was illegal and that the Constitution didn't exist anymore and so on and so forth, I said, that can't be right. And it was only when I found an old CD in my drawer that I'd got a year before, and I just threw it in the drawer, and there was no letter accompanying it, so I didn't know what it was. So one day I was cleaning out my drawer and I picked up the CD, and by the time I finished playing it, my jaw was on the ground, because I understood finally how they changed all the laws and deprived us of our rights. And you can go to my website, cirnow.com.au, and you'll see criminals in government. It's right up the top of the page. And there's a video on there you've really got to go and watch, because it shows how Rudd and Goss wrote a law called the Reprints Act. And it wasn't a law at all. And when they registered that to their private corporation in the USA, they put it up on the OSLI website. But if you read it, it says at the bottom, for educational purposes only, copyright to the all caps Commonwealth of Australia, which is their private corporation that they've set up to govern us. That is not our government. Our government is the standard form of Commonwealth of Australia. So we have two governments here, but one government is not doing anything at the moment because it can't. We're ruled by the gun.
So, for those who are here with us today listening in, What do you want them to know about common law and how could it serve their family?
I think you're probably asking there, how can we survive on common law? Well, the thing is, we have to remember right now we have two laws. We have common law, which is the law of the people, the law of the land, the law of the universe, whatever you want to call it, natural law. And we have admiralty law, which is the government's law. And that's administered from Rome, very different law. So common law is like, it's like those two laws are like chalk and cheese. You cannot mix the two. So if you think that you're going to use common law to exist in their admiralty law, it's not going to work. You have to know your rights so that you can protect them when they come after you. But knowing common law won't do that. Knowing your rights will. And you've got to know your rights in the law. So if you're going to fight fines, for instance, you need to know what laws protect you there or how you can settle fines legally and lawfully and easily for that matter. Common law is what we will use as the basis for a new government when this one falls over. And I believe it's very, very close to falling over. Basically, they've dug their own hole. And they're going to collapse because the whole system is collapsing, not just here in Australia, but worldwide. And we see all these people rioting in the streets in all these different countries now. Nepal has already overthrown theirs. Another country's in the process. Oh, Indonesia just did. Why can't we? Because the people here have lost their heart. They've lost their soul. They've lost their guts. I grew up in Australia where a man was an actual man, and now, well, we can't tell, can we?
Before we continue with my next question for you, Mike, we're just going to take a minute to thank today's sponsor, Jacinta Cornell Skin. Jacinta is an holistic skin therapist and qualified corneotherapist helping you get to the root cause of your skin concerns. Jacinta offers personalized in-clinic and online consultations using only high-quality, natural and fragrance-free skincare, including the renowned Dermavigils range, which I've been using for a few years now, and honestly, I can't recommend enough. And just for our listeners, you can enjoy 10% off your consultation, plus she ships Australia-wide, so you can access professional skin support from the comfort of your home. To book or browse her range, head to Jacinta Cornell Skin. Now, let's get back into today's episode. So, Mike, can you break down for me and the person that's listening with us today, what is digital ID and what is really going on behind the scenes of what we're being told?
Well, it all comes down to the one world government that they're trying to set up. The World Economic Forum is trying to set up a one world government with them in charge and the rest of us basically as slaves. That's why they've been trying to eliminate us over these years with the COVID and everything else, because they're trying to kill us off. But we're just too ordinary to go, and there's too many of us. They can't kill us all off as much as they'd like. They're crazy eugenicists, and they're a holdover from the Nazis. So, it goes back way back in history. And if you look back way, way back, it goes back to, the Ashkenazi Jews in Central Europe, the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are Ashkenazi Jews, and they're so rich they think they can own the world. But they've lost the plot because they've forgotten about the heart of the people. We are people, human beings, and we have feelings, and we're not just going to be slaves. If they want slaves, let them go and build robots, but they're not going to enslave me. So what is a digital ID? It is a total enslavement system. During COVID, you may not have noticed this, although you might have by now, they were putting up cameras everywhere, right? You see them everywhere. There's cameras, cameras, cameras. What are they doing with those? That is going to be the surveillance system that keeps us in check. So can we get out of it? Actually, they've built in a get out of a jail free card. It's called Section 74, the Digital ID Act. And there is an article on my cirnow.com.au website. If you go in there and search for digital ID, you'll find the article. There's a very interesting video on there that explains exactly how they will control us. Once you're in it, you're never going to get out of it. So we've got to stop it now. But I'm very buoyant about this because I'm an old tech head. I started working in computers way back in 1965. And I've been in the business for a long, long time. I'm a programmer, base engineer, all sorts of things, and even did some hacking in my early days. So I've got pretty good knowledge of technical issues. And digital ID, first of all, they have a big problem with protecting your data in one central database, because that's what they're going to do. They're going to build a big central database, huge data center, and everything will be in there. Well, I guarantee you, if I sat down for, I don't know, maybe a day or two, I could hack into the system. I wouldn't even have to try, because they're not very competent. Everything the government does falls apart. They can't do it properly because they don't know. Basically, they're just boys who couldn't get a job anywhere else, and they become politicians because that's all they're capable of doing. And that really is the mud rising to the top.
So, Mike, I saw a video back when COVID was beginning. I was very skeptical and I felt like there was something really, really wrong with the vaccine and getting pushed.
Yeah.
I ultimately did lead to, well, I just call myself a coward for feeling like I was pushed into a corner and that I needed to. But I have sworn to myself and my family that I will never do something to my body that doesn't feel right by me ever again. And this leads me to creating this podcast and taking everybody on a journey with me to getting a better understanding and learning how we can better protect ourselves and set our families up, because COVID was just the beginning.
Oh, yes.
So this brings me back to this video that I saw and I will never forget. And I just want to paint the picture, and I want to ask you if you see this too. It was everyone's pushed into cities, and you're like on a credit system. So if you need to purchase meat, for example, you are only allowed to purchase a certain amount, and it uses a certain amount of your credits.
Well,
And
let me interrupt there, because I've actually got the answer there for you. Because it's such a total surveillance system, digital ID will intrude on every aspect of your life. You will not be able to do anything without worrying about your social credit score. Now, if you start out with a score of 900 and it dips below, say, 500, you start getting restricted. You can't travel. You can't buy so much meat. You can't go to this shop. You can't get on a train. And eventually, if you keep dropping your social credit score, you won't be able to exist. They'll just kill you, basically. And it'll just be a soft death. They'll starve you to death.
so I used to believe in climate change. I no longer believe in climate change because of seeing the agenda of what it actually imposes. Do you also believe then that they have, with the meat thing, they're taking that away from us
Well,
because, but they're selling it as a COVID, as a climate change. So if you want to care for the environment, don't eat meat. However, it is actually the deeper agenda.
if the government says don't eat meat, you do the exact opposite. If the government says the sky is pink, you say it's blue. You never ever believe what they say, because we know they lie. They lie about every damn thing. So forget about all that stuff. In fact, I'm on a carnivore diet right now. I'm only eating meat, and it's good for you. So don't believe them.
So you're saying that with this digital ID, our future, so our children's future is going to be so heavily controlled and monitored that if they wanted to go on the carnivore diet, it'd basically be impossible.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay,
You will be
cool. So
told.
let's get into the action plan. How
Yeah.
can we as families better protect our family now and to not sign up for this? But even a step back, sorry, everyone who received the COVID vaccination, they were behind that was signing up to digital ID, wasn't it? Because everyone had to get the certificate so they could go anywhere. So that was the start of this.
You have to know 4 words. I do not consent. It's that simple. So if they say, oh, you've got to have a digital ID to log into the GovCorp website, no, I'm sorry, I'm not doing that. You must write to me. And I'm demanding any government that wants to have any dealings with me must write a letter to me. And there's a very good reason for that, because when I'm dealing with them, I build up a paper trail. Right? This is a paper trail with the Queensland government, who's trying to get money from me for fines. But I've already settled the fines with a bill of exchange, and then they're denying the law. So I'm keeping the paper trail. And if it does get to court, I'll just walk in and say to the judge, here's my paper trail. I've already settled the account. Why are these people bringing me here under false pretenses and wasting the court's time?
Mike, we live in a society where everybody loves convenience, and I can't help but to feel that majority of my generation would prefer to keep their head buried in the sand than do this and comply and then stand up for this.
Look, I've been in this fight for so long, I've come to realize one very simple fact. You can't help those who won't help themselves. And so they will have to suffer the consequences of that decision. While we're out there in the green fields and cavorting around enjoying our lives, they're going to be stuck in a prison. That's their problem, not mine, not yours. So if they don't wake up, they're going to have a problem. And we can already see, we've been told already that the world financial system right now is in financial collapse. It's all happening right now. What's going to happen when you go to the bank and they won't give you any money, which they're doing now? Vietnam just closed 98 million bank accounts because the people wouldn't take digital ID. Didn't work because there's people still won't get digital ID. So, it's up to each person to take responsibility for their own decisions. Now, actually, this is one of the tenets of common law. We have two tenets: do no harm and take responsibility for your own decisions. That's it. That's common law. So very easy.
Why should everyday Australians be so concerned about digital ID?
Because if they're not concerned about it, if they say, oh yeah, I'll sign in there, they become prisoners. Basically, they become digital prisoners. They won't be able to do anything that they like. They won't be able to go out fishing on the weekend because there's no petrol. You only get a certain amount of petrol ration per month. You can only buy a certain amount of meat or fish or anything at the supermarket. If you buy too much alcohol, they will reduce your social credit score, because that's bad for society. If you buy baby napkins or drinking water, your social credit goes up. So they will score every action that you take in public, and therefore they will control your life.
So will this, for people like you and I who are speaking out on social media about things that the government pushes, they will basically have the power to shut us down completely and wipe us out, won't they?
They will. If you go to my I've got more websites, another website called MikeHoltShow.com, and on there I've set up a private forum. Now, you have to pay to get in. It's only $7 a month. But once you get in there, it's behind a paywall, and we will all be able to control who gets in there, because if somebody gets in there, it's obviously causing trouble. You report it and they get thrown out. But otherwise, it'll be free speech. You can do whatever you like, as long as you cause no harm, right? So there are ways around these things. We don't need the government. The government needs us. That's why they're pushing so hard to get control over us. But you and I can live quite freely. Look, I lived in Thailand for 30 years, which is a very free country, or it was. And I went up there and I loved what the people were doing. There were so many people out on the streets being entrepreneurs, selling their little stuff. And then there was other businessmen, and I met a lot of them, and I decided to stay there. I ended up staying in Thailand 30 years. I got into business up there. I ran 3 companies, and I never had any problem with the government. I paid my taxes, but that was it. Everything else, I got no problem. I didn't have to worry about rates or people coming around with forms and saying you've got to fill this in, or chasing up my bank accounts or anything. None of that happened. And that's the way I like to live. So when I came back here and I saw what was going on here, well, that's when I really started to look into things, and that's what's brought me up here to today. I can see all of this thing because I've lived through it. I've lived free. I actually was brought up in the Commonwealth of Australia, so I know what that was like. And until 1972, it was a great country. There were problems, but nothing like what we've got today. And then now we've got this wall gradually closing in on us, and it's about there right now. The wall is about to meet. And when it does, we'll all be in prison. Not me, because I won't subject myself to it. I'll just say I do not consent. You want to talk to me? You write to me. We have an absolute right under Magna Carta Section 61 to lawfully rebel, and that includes deposing a government when it no longer serves the will of the people. If it is harming the people, we have a duty to arrest that government. And that's why I've been saying online, we need strong young men who are willing to march into Parliament, 2,000 or 3,000 of them, and take over the Parliament and arrest everybody in there. And we will then set up, our group will then set up common law courts, probably on the lawns of the Parliament, and we will televise it to everybody in Australia and show them what happens when we put these criminals on trial. Okay? Some will be accused of treason, and we all know the punishment for treason. So, any carpenters out there?
So, what changes do you think we'll start to see once digital ID becomes mandatory here in Australia?
I don't think it's going to be able to get that far. That's what they want, and that's what they're trying to scare us with. But they don't have the technology all set in yet, and they certainly don't have the technical expertise to run it properly. As I said, hackers will hack into that straight away. They're already doing it, so it's already happened, right? I mean, look at Optus. They got hacked, and that's a government organisation. Easy. And they're supposed to be telecommunications experts. Well, that was my expertise too. When I joined the Air Force, I became a telegraphist, which was basically a telecommunications expert. I did encryption, air-to-air and air-to-ground communications, Morse code, what else? Securities, checks, and all sorts of stuff. So I was taught all this stuff from 17 years old when I joined the Air Force. So I've been a long time. So when I talk about these things, I think I've got a pretty good record for understanding and knowing what's going on.
They say here in Australia in October, they're making it mandatory that you need your ID to be able to go on the internet. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, as I said, Section 74 of the Digital ID Bill says that they cannot bar you and they must provide an alternate way of logging in. Well, we already have an alternate way of logging in. They're trying to impose their login on you. No, they can't do that. And if they do, there's going to be serious repercussions to them. I mean, first of all, it's going to lose the social media companies here a lot of money. Who do you think is going to come back and go after the government? The social media companies. And they're far richer than the Australian government. So I don't think it's going to happen. But if it does, all hell's going to break loose.
So, what you're saying then is we as people, and for the person sitting with us today, if we don't abide and if we pull off social media, we hold the power in that.
That's right.
So, even though just like COVID times when they told us it's going to take us our freedom away, our travel away, hang in there because it won't last.
No. And, if people had been aware before, because I never bowed down to any of it, but if people had been bowed down to it then and said, I do not consent, remember, I do not consent, then nothing would have happened. It's only because people fell over and said, oh, yes, what do I have to do, government? The government should be afraid of us. We don't have to be afraid of the government. They have to be afraid of us. And that's the problem. So when you've got a government that does not fear us, we have tyranny, which is what we have now. We have to make them fear us. And I can't tell you too much right now, but there are groups working behind the scenes who are coming up with some pretty good solutions. And it's coming very soon. So I wouldn't worry too much at this stage. Let the government get up and make all the noise they like, but at the end of the day, they can do nothing without our consent, right? So if they come to you and say, you've got to do something, no. Now, during COVID, for instance, on the first day of the lockdown, I had some friends around here visiting me because I asked them to come and witness me on an online court case. And cops turned up. It's about 8 cops. And they got to my front door and I said, what do you want? And oh, we're here because you're breaking the law, blah, blah. I said, well, first of all, you're trespassing on my property. You see the sign out the front? You're trespassing. That is a crime. Secondly, read the Constitution. You have no right to be here. Section 23A of the Section 51, 23A of the Constitution states very clearly that the government may not impose any force for us to take any medical procedure. Okay, read it. Constitution. And they, after about 20 minutes of me refusing to comply, they all walked away. They couldn't do anything. If you do not comply, there's nothing they can do. If you do not accept their terms, there's nothing you can do because they come here seeking to contract with you. And if there's one-sided contract, it's null and void, doesn't work. So you've just got to know your rights. So if you go onto law.earth, you can read all about your rights.
It sounds as though when I'm hearing with what you say, when the police came to your door, it sounds as though that they don't even know that either. It's like they're on a puppet string too,
They are.
and the people above them are doing the dance. And really no one actually knows what the hell anyone's doing or what we're right, but we just go by what the media says and what it feeds us. And I think of it on a grand scale of like, you know, the top dog on the top of the pyramid, we're at the bottom. I just think of it like they can literally decide whatever they want and just go, we'll feed it to the media and everyone will follow. But what you're saying is there's laws to protect us. You just need to take the time to become educated, to learn it so you can stand up. Because if we do not do that now, we will be going straight back through COVID again. And I remember that time all so well. I just remember having conversations with people who would just keep saying we have no other choice, we have no other choice, but really they were holding on to the freedom of to the traveling and to the friends and the parties and the gatherings and really if we had have all held in tighter for longer and stood our ground, we would have gotten through the other side okay.
Exactly.
And it just shows that we're all cowards. After I finally took it, and I have my own reasonings. I thought it was just the only way. I had a business at the time, I had staff. I thought I was just done. And when I walked in there to receive that vaccine, I thought I was receiving my death wish. I know that they're being creating an infertile population, and I thought that was it. I'm not going to be able to have kids. This is going to affect my pregnancy. I had it when I was pregnant. I had it when I was 12 weeks pregnant, and my daughter came early from her placenta stopping working. And if you look on Pfizer's list of side effects, it is in that list that it will ruin your placenta, basically, and it will stop working. And so she came at 36 weeks. And from that point in time, I took an oath to myself that I would never receive a vaccine from the government because when you actually start to look at the whole agenda behind vaccines, and this is why I've gone on to start this podcast, have interviews with like-minded people like you who are brave enough to speak out about this because majority of people wanted to bury their head in the sand and majority of people don't want to hear it.
But they're busy living their lives. They don't have time to fight all this stuff. I'm retired and I got all the time in the world to fight this stuff. So I don't blame them. And there's a lot of people like me out there, more than you might realize. And we're all working together. You know, they're always saying, oh, the leaders of all the groups should get together. No, I call ourselves the whack-a-moles because, you know, the old whack-a-mole game, if one head pops up, you try and whack it. And the government can go around trying to bang us all down, but there's just too many of us and we keep popping up, right? They dragged me through the courts for 5 years for speaking my mind. And I walked out of there. Yeah, they convicted me of publishing an article. How terrible. And I just walked out. That was it. Finished. I don't care. They can't shut me up. They never will. And I'm old enough and ornery enough that I really don't care.
The majority of people, Mike, would be scared. I know that if I said something on social media and I had the police knocking at my door saying you've spoken outside of blah, 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 blah. Because look, majority of people who are pro-vaccine, for example, already think that anyone speaking out, and not just in an anti-vaccine place, more in a place of just maybe we should be questioning this, like something doesn't feel right. We shouldn't be injecting our 2-hour-old baby with 72 vaccines over the course of its life within 4 years, like something doesn't feel right. We should be able to say that and not be, one, just even labeled an anti-vaxxer, but two, labeled dangerous. I have heard this and seen it so many times that people speaking out about this is dangerous. They're going to be able to shut us up, so there's only going to be whatever the government teaches everybody, there's only going to be that one way.
This is a little pocket device. Inside there is the IC card, and you just put that in here. And then you just use an app on your phone. And I'd rather not have an app iPhone, but an old Android. And it's like a private radio network, and we're setting up these networks. I'm just testing it now, and we're setting up these networks across Australia using the ham radios as well, and you'll be able to call up anyone, the government system. It'll be private. So we're setting all that up too. We've got a lot of projects going on, but basically what we're doing now is setting up a completely new infrastructure, government and social, apart from the one that we have now. And people will come over to this new one because we're going to be giving them incentives to come over. And the government will just die a natural death because nobody will support it. If you don't support a government, It just can't you can't survive. And that's what we're going to do. We're now actively in the process of providing an alternative system. Just to give you an idea, we've got a voting app, which is based on the blockchain, and it's going to be funded by, well, it's already funded. We've got big funding coming in, and it's a voting app, right? So we're now training people to start using the app to vote on any issue at any time, anywhere, right? So we'll get rid of centralized government, and we're going to make everybody have the power to make the decisions. And it'll be very simple. You just log in on the voting app, and that will be linked to other apps which will benefit us, and it'll be a whole new system.
So going back a little bit, for anyone that got the COVID jab and who has already signed up to digital ID, is there a way of them getting off of it?
COVID jab first. Get yourself some nicotine patches. These are not natural, but they're at least they're a good start. Put one of these on. Actually, I'd recommend at your size probably a half or even a quarter, and just put it on, and that kills the spike protein that's interfering with any health issues that you may be having if you had the jab.
If anyone signed up to digital ID at that time of receiving the COVID jab, because most people did, to be able to get the certificate on their phone, is there any way of them getting off of digital ID?
Probably not, but then again, you don't have to be on it. You don't have to use it, right? It's all controlled by this. They rely on this technology to run everything. And what happens if the technology burns down? There's a lot of 5G towers in England are burning down at the moment. Doesn't work. They're going to be out. That's why we're setting up an alternative system that doesn't rely on their technology. We're going to have old-fashioned technology with radio and farming, real farming, housing plots. Now, I grew up in England. The first 5 years of my life, I was born in England, and it was just after the war. So I grew up seeing houses with their old back garden plots of gardens, and they were growing all their food during the war. We could do the same thing here. But you can't do that here because the council says, no, you can't do that. You can't grow that food outside on the footpath or in the parks or in your backyard. And they're trying to shut all of this down. That's not our system. We don't care about them anymore. We're moving into a whole new age, a whole new system. And just to give you an idea, I've got a website called futureplan. And on that, I lay out a 5-point plan that will get our country back on track very quickly. So point 1 and 2, the digital app is already, and voting is already, it's putting the power into the hands of the people. Citizens initiated referendums so that we vote on them. And step 3 is to reorganize the whole government infrastructure. So instead of top-down government, we're coming from the people. So what we're doing is proposing that we reduce the size of each electorate, because each electorate's about 100,000 voters. Reduce that down to 5,000 voters for one electorate. Then combine 50 electorates to create one regional government. Now, each electorate will elect one of their own, not a politician, but one of their own that they deem is suitable to go and sit in the regional government. So we have 50 representatives, and they are directly accountable back to the voter, and they can be recalled and replaced at any time using the digital voting app if they don't perform properly, right? Now, each region, it'd probably be about 100 regions around Australia. Each region will elect one person to represent them in the federal government. And the federal government will go by the Constitution only. They're not there to do all this social conditioning and all this other rubbish. They must follow the Constitution. And if you read the Constitution, Section 51, there's a whole bunch of things in there that the federal government is responsible for. And that is all they are responsible for, right? There's nothing in there about a prime minister, nothing in the Constitution about political parties. There's nothing in there about social engineering and doing all this other stuff. They have acted contra the Constitution. That is treason, right? It's treason to the people. So they must now start facing the consequences of those decisions. They've got away with it for too long, but now too many of us know too much. And I actually sell a book called Australian Political and Religious Leaders, Treason, Treachery and Sabotage by Dick Yardley. Now, Dick was a farmer up in North Queensland, a fruit farmer. He put up some fencing around his fruit trees to protect it from bats, electrified. And the council came along and said, no, you've got to take that down. The fruit bats are protected. He said, no, it's my property. I'll protect my property from the fruit bats. So they stole his land. They took him to court and stole his land. He lost it. And that's when he sat down and started researching that book and trying to find out the answers to why they could do that. And that 500-page plus book shows exactly how they did it, all the laws they changed, at what time, and how, everything, who did it, and it's all detailed in there. So that really is it's an indictment. We can take that into court. And when they were trying me in court in Victoria, I did put that book into the court as evidence. It's still there. They haven't read it and they deny it, but it's there as evidence, and I will use that when the day comes, right? They will be held accountable.
So when we talk about things like voting, do we legally have to participate? And if not, how can someone stand outside the system without facing the penalties?
I haven't voted for years. Why should I? I don't have to. I don't want to vote for any of these people because I know how criminal they are. So no, you don't have to vote. But people will say, oh, but what about the fine? So what? Just do a bill of exchange on it. I don't ever pay any fines with my cash. I do a bill of exchange. That is, when they send me the bill, I put my signature and the date, just like a check, and I send it back to them. And that's settled by law under the Bills of Exchange Act 1909. When they get it, once they accept that bill of exchange and they hold it for more than the specified time, usually 72 hours, but you could say within 3 days or within 5 days, whatever, you set the terms. And if they don't send it back to you, it's settled. And they never do send it back to you, so it's always settled. And then they come back to you and say, oh, but we don't accept a bill of exchange. Really? So prove to me that you are exempt from the law. Prove that you're exempt from this Bills of Exchange Act that you say doesn't apply to you. And they can't prove it. And if it gets to court, as it has, we win.
So you're saying that if we do not vote and they send us the bill, we date it, we sign it, we send it back, and that settles that. And that is covered. We are protected by law to be able to just do that.
Yes.
How far do you think Australia will go this road of digital control, and what's your thoughts on the perspective of the 15-minute smart cities?
Have you seen any smart cities? They're nowhere near ready. I mean, Australia is so big, they can't do it. And they can't even build a road. I mean, we've got the Hume Highway up the road here. They've been building that ever since I came back to Australia. And I think years before that, they still haven't finished it. It's just ridiculous. These governments make all these big claims, but I don't think they can do it. They'll try, and they'll go after the kids first logging in. But of course, we all know that once they get the kids on the digital ID, then it spreads to everything else. But just don't let your kids get on there.
What do you think this is all going to look like in 5 years' time?
I think we're going to be living free. I think we're going to have a completely different system. And I think we're all going to be making money without having to work in a job we don't like. We'll be able to do the things we want to do. And we'll be living off the fat of the land. Look, I grew up in the country that was called the Lucky Country, and we used to live off the sheep's back. Well, now we're going to be living off the country's back because we've got trillions of dollars worth of in-ground assets, right? We've got millions of good people here who want to work and want to do the things that they want to do. So I think eventually we're going to have a very good country back to where we were. Maybe not exactly the same, but a better one, better than what we've got now. I'm very optimistic.
For someone who's listening and feels overwhelmed by all of this, where's the best place to start?
Well, join my Zoom chats every Thursday and come and listen and learn. And I answer questions and other people answer questions. We have good chats, It's all well organised, and there's an hour of discussion. And if you want to catch the other Zoom chats for Europe and the Americas as well, get up early in the morning and join me on Friday morning. So,
What message of encouragement would you leave our listeners today?
well, look, you've heard what I've been saying, and I think if you've taken this in, it's up to you now to safeguard your own rights and protect them. And you can only do that with knowledge, and knowledge is power. So my websites are cirnow.com.au, mikeholtshow.com, advance-australia.com.au, and commonlaw.earth and futureplan.earth. I make a lot of websites, but each one has a specific purpose, right? So if you want Dick Yardley's book, that's on Advance Australia.
Thank you so much, Mike. I'll attach all of your links to your websites in the show notes. For the person that's listening, if you have made it on this far, thank you. If you could please send this episode to a friend, to a family member, and hopefully it can get the sparks going and making everyone just remember that we have more power than what sometimes we realize. And if we all work together, then hopefully that we can put a pause on what we know the deeper agenda here. As always, thank you for being here with me on Align Yourself podcast. Until next time, stay aligned and stay aware. Have an amazing day.